Hi software, welcome back to the Canvas where we're going to start integrating all those things you guys have been learning about conditionals to something visible and interesting and interactive, which I'm really excited for. You should by now already have the starter code open. Please make sure you're logged in and you go up to File Duplicate so you can get your copy, which should say copy, and your username after it. Then make sure you're doing File Save. Remember, when you're clicked into the code, you can also do a Command S or a Control S if you are on a non-Mac machine in order to save your code pretty rapidly and while you are coding. So we, if we run this, have a pretty boring program where we just have this ellipse and this rectangle chilling on the page and not really doing much of anything. And my dream for this program, at least for the ellipse, which is the one we're going to do together, is I would like it to be a pretty color, and when I am on the left-hand side of the screen, which is over here, I want it to change a color, and then when I'm on the right-hand side of the screen, I want it to change to a different color, and maybe if I'm like in the exact perfect middle of my screen, then I want it to be like a third secret Easter eggy kind of color. So we're going to need conditionals, all parts of our conditionals, in order to do this. But we are also going to need something else that's going to call us back to Unit 1. If there is something on the screen that I want to change, meaning I want it to vary as I'm using the program, I need to have a variable. So I'm going to practice making a variable and assigning it a color, which might be something new for us, using the variable in my program, and then making a conditional that will change the value of my variable. Again, I cannot stress this enough. Our general rule of thumb is if something already exists on the screen, we are not redrawing it. We are changing a variable in order to make it change and adjust. Now, if we had a conditional where nothing was on the screen and we wanted something to appear like a secret message, by all means, we could like call some text or some shapes or whatever to make that pop up. But I already have my shapes. I just want them to change. So meet me at the top of your code at the beginning of line 1, and I'm going to hit enter so that I can start above all of my functions and make my first variable. I'm going to start with var, which we remember is that short word that tells the computer whatever's coming next is a word that we'll be using to hold data. Because I know this is going to be changing the color of a circle on my page, I'm going to call it circle color. Now, generally, variables are named things that make sense in our program. We've talked about this before, but if you wanted to name this variable Susan or unicorns or magic rainbows, all of those would be totally acceptable variable names in the sense that they would work, but it would make your code really hard for you to look back on and read and understand. So I recommend using variable names that you can spell and that make sense to you. This first step is us declaring our variable. So we've told the computer that we are using it. Now this on line 1 makes it what we call a global variable, meaning I can use it anywhere in the program, which is why we're declaring it there. In setup, I'm going to give it the value I want it to start the program with. So I'm going to say circle color equals something. And I want this to be an entire color. So in order to have 3 values saved to this variable, I need to tell the computer that I'm about to give it a color. This is really important, and I can almost guarantee that at some point this year, all of you are going to tell me a color isn't working, and it's going to be because you forgot this word. You have to tell the computer, I'm about to save a color, so that it knows these are 3 separate values. The color I want my circle to start with, I think, is going to be magenta, because that's an easy one that I know off the top of my head. So I'm going to say 0, 255, 0, 255. And this is my initializing step. So I've given it a value. That's what it starts at. Then my last step is to use my variable by plugging it into the fill above my ellipse. So I'm going to plug in my variable called circle color, and this is using my variable. Now, I have a circle, and if I hit play, it should show up as magenta, and we'll notice everything is magenta because I did not give that rectangle a separate color, and you guys are going to tackle that in your challenge. So I'm not even worried about that part right now. Once we have this, we are going to start making a conditional that will change this color. So what I normally recommend, there's a few ways you can do this and ways that sometimes make more sense than what I'm about to tell you. But when we're starting out, I like to keep all the things that just live on my canvas all the time towards the top of my draw function. And then I like to have my conditionals towards the bottom, just so it's easy for me to figure out where things are and change them. So I'm going to drop down underneath my rectangle, and I'm going to say that this is my conditional to change circle. That's going to be my code label, so I know what this does if I need to go back to it. And I'm just going to make some notes for myself of how I want this to run. So if mouse is on left, change color to, let's say, yellow. If mouse is on right, change to magenta. If in perfect center, and let me put some else's in here. Else if it's in anywhere else. I won't even say perfect center, I'll just say anywhere else. Else if it's somewhere else on the page, turn cyan. Those are going to be my three colors, and this is what I'm going to try and code with you. So here's how I'm going to do this. I'm going to bounce down a line, and I'm just going to start my conditional. I'm going to start with an if. I'm going to pull out all my syntax, so I have my parentheses, I have my curly braces, I'll drop them down, I'll even adjust my indentation so it looks really nice and perfect. And then the first thing I have to think through is what's going to be my condition that decides if my mouse is on the left side of the canvas. So when I'm thinking left side, I'm thinking over here. And I also know that my canvas has an exact center. And I could estimate the center, but I know that this canvas, because it happens in setup, is 400 pixels wide and 400 pixels tall. For that matter, it's a perfect square. But the center of 400 would be 200. So that center is going to be an important line for me. We can imagine it running right through these two. That's going to decide, am I on the left or am I on the right? Now, something I notice, if I'm thinking about left and right, I am thinking about the x-axis, which are the first numbers in this text box that's showing up. I know it's going to be really tiny in my YouTube video, so I would recommend you play with this on your screen. But anytime I'm on the left side of the canvas, all of those numbers are less than 200. So I think that I know I'm on the left side if the numbers are less than 200. And the specific numbers that have to be less than 200 are the x position of my mouse. So if the x position of my mouse is less than 200, that means I'm on the left side, and it means that my ellipse, actually, my circle color, should change color to yellow, which is 255, 255, 0. Now if I hit play, I'm going to get a yellow circle because my mouse already starts out on the left. It's automatically going to be yellow, and it's never going to change magenta because we don't have that else-if statement here. Something that can be really useful in these to see if they're working correctly can be console.logs, and we'll actually add those in at the end to make sure we know what's happening. So after this if statement, I'm going to put my cursor at the end of my line 23. I'm going to drop down, and I'm going to code in that else if to make sure that I have a way to get my circle to change to magenta. So this was for the left. Now I want to figure out the right. The right's going to be pretty easy because if mouse x being less than 200 means I'm on the left, mouse x being more than 200 would mean that I'm on the right. So now I want my circle color to change to magenta, which is what I started at. And now when I hit play, it's yellow over here, but as soon as I cross that center line, it turns magenta, and then it changes back to yellow. Now, there might be a world where I'm not on the canvas at all, or maybe when I'm in the perfect exact middle, I'm at exactly 200. And in that case, I'm going to use my else statement. So in my else statement, I'm going to say that if I'm anywhere that is not just the left or just the right, I want that circle color to change to cyan, which is 0, 255, 255. And notice before every single one of these, I have that color word. It's so important to make sure that the computer knows I am changing the variable circle color to an actual color. Now when I hit play, I get my yellow, I get my magenta, and then in the very middle, I get, if I'm perfect, I get cyan. Now I said console.logs are important. Sometimes you run into errors with these, and it's not always an error that shows up in your console. Sometimes it's something about the logic you decided on, or there's a typo somewhere that the computer is not catching, it's never being triggered. And adding console.logs don't do anything to our canvas, but they do give us really valuable messages to show up in the console. So for example, when I'm on the left, I might put console.log left. When I'm on the right, I might have it print right. And when I'm somewhere else, I might have it print somewhere else. Now, in addition to the color change, I have these really clear cues in my console about what's happening. I cannot stress the console enough because right now it may seem silly, but in the future, if you're struggling to get something to work, the first thing I'm going to do is suggest you put in a console.log to help you know if your conditional is working correctly or if maybe there's a problem with your variable. You guys, for this next challenge, are going to make this rectangle change differently from the circle. So it is going to need its own variable. Maybe you call it rect color. It's going to need to be initialized. It's going to need to be used in a fill above the rectangle. And then right underneath this conditional, above or below this block that says your challenge, you'll be coding in your conditional. Keep in mind all the conditionals we've coded so far are inside our draw function. Our draw function ends on line 36, and anything you add to this should be inside the draw function as well. Good luck, guys. I can't wait to see what you make.